Welcome to episode 254 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm sharing an instant way to create fewer assignments to grade. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. I wanted to tell you about a podcast that I recently discovered called Like a Sponge that has now become a sponsor of Truth for Teachers. It's produced by the nonprofit Great Schools, and it explores how children learn. The target audience is usually parents, but this year, Like a Sponge delved into something totally relevant for teachers: how to transform this 200-year-old institution known as the American high school to make it more equitable, student-centered, and humane. In each episode, we hear stories from educators who reinvented their practices to solve for disengaged students, trauma, and a legacy of racism. It's all part of transforminghighschool.org, a bilingual collection of multimedia content. You can find the Like a Sponge podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and let me know what you think. So our topic today is about finding an instant way to have fewer assignments to grade. And no, the answer is not throwing the whole stack of papers in the recycling bin, although it is perfectly fine to toss out some assignments from time to time. And the answer isn't to give more assignments digitally. That can help make assessment more effective and efficient, but the pileup of student work awaiting feedback online can feel just as daunting as a stack of papers. The instant way to reduce how many assignments you have to grade is to stop assigning so many things to begin with. I want you to step back from the problem and depersonalize it for a minute. Think about who is the person who is actually assigning the work. The kids didn't decide themselves to do all those homework assignments and practice activities and quizzes. Someone gave them those assignments. And sure, many of them may be things that you're mandated to give, that you need to, but not all of them. So could the person who is directly responsible for assigning tasks to students consider changing the type or the quantity or the due dates or the length of assignments or the assessment criteria in order to generate fewer assignments that need to be graded? Consider this analogy. Let's say that it's dinner time and you're the person responsible for that task tonight. You choose to make an elaborate 3-course meal with 2 protein choices and lots of different side dishes. And then afterwards you look around the kitchen and sigh, "Oh, look at all these dishes I have to wash." But here's the thing. Were you required to make a 3-course meal? Could you have used fewer ingredients? Could you have reused the same bowl for multiple purposes? Could you have washed dishes as you go? Could you have skipped a time-consuming side dish and replaced it with something simpler? The same goes for grading. Could you have given fewer assignments? Reused the same assignment for multiple grades? Graded things in class as students were working on them? Or skipped a time-consuming activity altogether? In the dinner example, you're responsible for the outcome, making sure everyone's fed a good meal. But how you choose to meet that outcome is largely your choice. Your family may need certain things done for them in a certain way, or whoever you're eating with may have allergies or special considerations in their diet. But also you have some choice about how you approach these requirements, as well as the work process itself in the kitchen. You can make it harder on yourself or easier on yourself based on the way you think about the process and the way you carry it out. Yes, in this example, you have to cook dinner, but you don't have to cook it in exactly that way every single day. Every single meal doesn't need to be an elaborate 3-course production. Similarly, you have to assess student learning, but you don't have to assess it in this very complex, time-consuming way every single day for every single assignment. Making very small tweaks to what you assign and how you assign things to students can have a significant impact on how many papers you then have to grade. It can mean the difference between grading for an hour on an occasional weekend to maybe having to do 3 hours every Saturday and Sunday. So if you heard my suggestion that to reduce the assignments that need to be graded, you need to stop assigning so many to begin with, and you immediately felt defensive and rolled your eyes like, oh boy, if only it was that easy, I want you to ask yourself, Is there one type of assignment that I'm currently giving to students that's taking me forever to grade and that I might be able to reduce or change up a bit? Just think about one thing that you're giving your students to do where you might have a little bit of leeway. Maybe you're giving spelling tests, which never help kids transfer their spelling skills over to their actual writing. Maybe you're giving homework every night and grading every single piece of it, even though the district doesn't require you to. Maybe you're giving elaborate projects or multiple lengthy essays, which are just beasts to grade. Maybe you're giving extra assignments just to have additional grades in your gradebook. Or maybe you're giving weekly quizzes when you're only required to give bi-weekly ones. I'm 100% positive that there is some way in which you're creating extra and unnecessary work for yourself, above and beyond what's required of you. I've never met a person, myself included, who isn't in some way overcomplicating their workload. We all have times when we assume things have to be done a certain way, and we don't question whether our current approach is the most effective way to do it. So consider only grading what is a true and important measure of what your students know and are able to do. This is a major overarching principle in my 40-hour teacher workweek program. We talk a lot about being really intentional about what you're going to give a formal assessment to and what you're just going to assess informally or check in with students about what they're doing. Some assignments can just be for practice. They don't have to be given an official grade. If we grade every piece of paper that our students touch, then when do they get a chance to just be learners? When do they get to experiment? When do they get to fail? If everything's graded, there is no chance for that. And how can we assign a grade to kids' understanding for a concept that they just learned about for the first time 20 minutes ago? Do we really need to grade that assignment when kids are going to be exploring the same skill again tomorrow and the next day and the next week, and then given a quiz and then more practice and then a test? How many times are we going to grade them on the same thing? Every single one of those assignments don't have to be graded in order for you to monitor student progress and know how kids are doing. And there's many, many ways to build in accountability and give feedback to students without issuing formal grades for every task they do. One approach you can learn about in episode 252 of the podcast, in which I interviewed the founder of the Modern Classrooms Project, Kareem Farah. He talks about using self-paced structures that some schools decide to call quests, which I think is really cool. In the quest, the kids get a list of tasks on Monday, and they have the whole week to work on them. And the teacher sets up checkpoints along the way, so the teacher is checking in with each individual throughout the week. And since kids are working at their own pace, there's then time during the school day for the teacher to monitor progress, meet one-on-one with students, and give detailed feedback. The Modern Classrooms approach actually makes time for assessment during class time in ways that are meaningful for kids and allow the teacher to actually confer with the student instead of just taking all the assignments home, grading it there, and then passing it back to kids the next day or having them log in online to see what you graded. So check out episode 252 if you want to learn more about the Modern Classrooms Project. Another great approach is episode 238, in which a fellow teacher named Megan Faherty shares 7 mindset shifts to help you get your grading under control. Listeners to episode 238 have told me that it was absolutely transformational for them in terms of deciding how to assess student learning in a more manageable way. One of my favorite tips from Megan in that episode is to schedule time for grading an assignment when you are designing that assignment. So instead of just piling work on kids and then watching them turn it in so that it becomes work piled up for you, consider whether you actually have time to grade something before you assign it. And when you do, put it on a to-do list when you assign it. So don't wait until you collect it or wait until the deadline is approaching to figure out when you're going to grade it. Decide in advance, I'm going to make this assignment due on Thursday, and then I'm going to grade it on Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. And really take an honest look at your schedule and decide. If you don't have time to give kids good feedback on it, then maybe you can assess it a different way or use that assignment in a different way for practice rather than formally grading it. The idea here is just to be more conscious about what you are assigning and how you're assessing it. So more about that in episode 238, along with other mindset shifts that can help you get your grading under control. Those are just a couple ideas to kind of get you thinking here. And my challenge to you this week is to think about one type of assignment that you could make easier to assess, or maybe not assess, or assign a formal grade to at all. And if you're into this idea, then I want you to take it a step further. I want you to take ownership of the grading process and habits that you've been dealing with. If your workload is absolutely outrageous and you are exhausted from spending every spare minute grading assignments, what will you do to push back against this expectation in your school? Will you be quietly subversive and find simple, subtle ways to reduce the workload to something that feels more reasonable? Will you work together with your colleagues to form a plan of action to bring to your principal and suggest proposed changes for next year's syllabus, or maybe a weighted graded system, or maybe changes to the required number of assignments for students? Will you join the 40-hour teacher workweek program this summer to commit with thousands of like-minded educators to making next school year the time when you find a sustainable approach to your workload? Just because every teacher you know is bogged down with endless grading does not mean that's the way it has to be, or that every teacher in the world feels like that, or that things can never be better. I've worked with countless teachers who have streamlined the way they assign tasks to students and monitor and assess student progress. There are so many different effective ways to teach, and investing a little bit of time into figuring out a way that's more efficient is a win for everyone. You get your nights and weekends back, and your students get a teacher who is balanced, well-rested, and no longer resentful of how demanding their job is. And this is a wonderful time of year to experiment. You already have a great rapport with your students, so you can try something different with this group of kids that you already know well, instead of waiting with a group in August that you haven't met yet. And your kids are getting restless this time of year anyway, right? They're ready for something different. They're eager to move on. They want some novelty. They're no longer responding as well to things that used to be effective earlier in the year. So what do you have to lose? Why not try something different now so you can start next school year with some new approaches under your belt? Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is this: only grade what is a true and important measure of what your students know and are able to do. You don't have to take as many grades when your gradebook is a true and accurate reflection of your students' skills. Give yourself permission to stop grading everything and find a more efficient way to give feedback and stay on top of students' progress. You can join us in the 40-hour teacher workweek program this summer if you want more ideas and support and community. The program has transformed the workloads of over 46,000 teachers, and so it can help you too. There's even a new 40-hour leadership course to help administrators shift school culture to focus more on productivity and efficiency, and support teachers in reducing their workload so they have better work-life balance. We also have a 40-hour instructional coaching program. So you can learn about all of that at 40htw.com if you're interested in joining us, 40htw.com. See if your principal's interested in letting you or a small group of colleagues pilot the program next school year, and you can begin implementing ideas right away. Later on, you may be able to expand the program to create positive change school-wide. In the meantime, stay focused on being more intentional with your assignments so that you have fewer assignments to grade. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.